When we hear something like this, who isn't moved by the passion and the power of Beethoven's ideas? Well, certainly they're not ideas about nuclear physics, but they are ideas. What's interesting, though, is that there's more to Beethoven's music. There's more to art. There's more to all of the fine arts than their affective nature. Certainly arts enrich us. They make us human. They make us more humane. And yet there's more to it than that. And it's this more to it than that that I want to talk about. Whether you like Bach's music or Beethoven's music or even Chuck Berry's music, there's more to their music than meets the ear. There's thinking going on. Yes, even critical thinking. It's difficult for those in the fine arts, those who advocate the arts, to admit the obvious. It's the elephant in the room. Well, the elephant in the world. Money! What counts in our world, in our capitalistic world, in this global economy, is math and science. Through math and science, people can make more money. And that's the way it is. We're not going to change that. All the impassioned Mr. Holland's opuses will not change the facts on the ground. And the facts on the ground are that thinking mathematically, thinking scientifically, discovering new things so that we can make more money is what motivates most people. Therefore, it is simply illogical to keep screaming the arts are important. Can't you get that through your thick head? It's not going to change anyone's mind. So knowing that, logically, would mean that those of us who support the arts move in a different direction. Instead of taking it directly to the man and a head-on confrontation, maybe a flanking move. Maybe get around that guard so that you can get to the quarterback, whose name might be Donald Trump or Rupert Murdoch, anybody with lots of money. Those are going to be the quarterbacks. And we want to get to the quarterbacks because the quarterbacks call the shots. What I present in this video is a flanking move. How we can help others see the importance of thinking through the arts as it impacts thinking in general. Not necessarily artistic thinking in general. And I believe that this line of an offense, I don't want to say attack because that would be taken wrong. This direction may be much more beneficial. Well, if thinking is important, if thinking mathematically is important, if thinking scientifically is important, we could also use the word reasoning for thinking. If you think, you reason, and if you reason, you think. What are some of the types of reasoning that we expect children to engage in their education so that they can wind up to be productive citizens and make more money? Well, here are some. There's abduction, there's analogical reasoning, there's cause and effect, there's conditional reasoning, criteria reasoning, decompositional reasoning, deductive reasoning, inductive reasoning, modal logic, traditional logic, pros and cons reasoning, set-based reasoning, systematic reasoning, syllogistic reasoning, on and on and on. That is a mouthful. And quite frankly, that's more to keep up with than most of us want to keep up with. One thing that I know about education is you simply must keep it simple. If we're not going to keep it simple, it's too complicated to deal with. Out of these, I don't know, 15 or so types of reasoning, what could we distill? How could we distill those down to just a few so that we can keep track of them more easily? Well, let's go back to our two basic bread and butter concepts in school, which are math and science. Scientific problem solving, scientific thinking, uses induction and deduction. You start from a single event or a sampling of events and you generalize, or you start with the generalization and you deduce to a sample. It's either small to large or large to small. And those are our two basic ways of thinking. We can explain it in other ways, as you can read on this slide, and yet that's basically it. Small to large or large to small. Reasoning is the foundation of mathematics. As science verifies through observation, mathematics relies on logic. Logic. Thinking. Scientific reasoning, thinking, is observation leading to laws, to rules, something that we can count on, external to the body. Mathematical thinking is internal, a way of seeing things in your mind, deducing, inferring. As you know, there is the field of logic in academia. There are individuals who study logic. One of the leaders was named Charles Sanders Peirce. He synthesized all logical thinking down to three basic types: deductive, inductive, and abductive. Reasoning is the process of using existing knowledge to draw conclusions, make predictions, or construct explanations. This will be very important in the foregoing or the ongoing conversation. Listen again. Reasoning is the process. Reasoning is the process of using existing knowledge. This is important. Existing knowledge. To draw conclusions, make predictions, or construct explanations. Draw conclusions, make predictions, construct explanations. These three methods are deductive, inductive, and abductive approaches to thinking. Deductive reasoning is basically standing on the edge of the Grand Canyon and knowing that if you jump off, gravity will take you to the bottom really quickly. So you probably won't want to jump off. Inductive reasoning is basically a diet. Fad diets are based on inductive reasoning, or they're sold, I should say, on inductive reasoning. Well, if it worked for these people, it should work for me. but there's no guarantee that it should work for you or for me. And that's why there's varying results with fad diets, because there's really no guarantee. There may be a high probability, but there's no guarantee. This is induction. And abduction is seeing around the corner to something new. When you're using abductive thinking, you must be able to use deductive and inductive reasoning together to see new possibilities. And we prize abductive thinking. And why? It's because these are things that don't necessarily exist in our world. The thinking that goes on in abductive thinking is not current thinking. It's an educated guess. You don't really know. It's a hypothesis, these sort of things. The real beauty of abductive thinking is innovation and creativity. Being able to see outside of the box. People who think outside of the box use a lot of abductive thinking. Being able to take this and see, oh, we could do this. That is innovation and creativity. And the cool thing to realize about innovation and creativity is that they are based on previously learned skills of deduction and induction. It doesn't happen capriciously. It doesn't happen magically. There is a process. And we can help everyone become better at induction, deduction, and adduction. And we can help people become better at those three through the arts. Recall that reasoning is the process of using existing knowledge to draw conclusions, make predictions, or construct explanations. Existing knowledge. Reasoning. When we reason either silently or verbally, out loud. It's either covert or overt. Because covert reasoning doesn't really transfer well to students, we use a lot of conversation when we are teaching. We use, in the jargon, metacognition. We help students get into our minds and help them to learn the skills that we already have. We teach by example. Hopefully, we do. So reasoning is a conversation, whether with yourself or with someone else. You're trying to talk through something. Will this work? Will this not work? What do you think? Blah, blah, blah. That's reasoning. It's a conversation. A finished artistic product is not the end. Rather, it beckons us to begin an intelligent conversation. A conversation involving reason, involving rational thought, beyond, as I said at the beginning, beyond the pretty picture, beyond the cute lyric, beyond the melody, there is something cool going on. For every pencil stroke, for every color selected, for everything a child does artistically, there is a rational reason for it. For most children, art is not about expressing the unexpressible. And adults tend to throw that out as reason why the arts are important, and they are. Isadora Duncan is oft quoted, If I could say it, I wouldn't have to show you through dance. And the same thing has been said for painting. There are things about the arts that make the unexpressible via language expressible. And my contention is, my point is, children by and large are not at that rarefied level of expression. They're going to choose media, they're going to choose what they do based on some fairly rational decisions based on their experiences. And it's those things that we can tap into that will make for intelligent conversations that lead to learning about logic, the logic of being a human. Arts as context is a context for thinking. It is a context for getting into a child's thinking and reasoning through the process of learning about life. A finished artistic product is not the end, rather it beckons us to begin an intelligent conversation, and intelligent conversations must be grounded in a context, and the context for me is thinking non-verbally through the arts. To help drive my point home, to help you understand the beauty of arts as context, let's go back, let's say 2,500 years, to the Greeks, the ancient Greeks, and their doctrine of ethos. They had a balanced education of mind, body, and spirit. Regardless of what the mind, an education in the mind meant, regardless of what an education of the body meant, or of the spirit, the Greeks understood that to be educated, it took more than being a brainiac. Even though in today's world, being a brainiac is the only thing you need to be. Let's jump forward a couple thousand years to today. In the 50s, actually it's not today, it's back in the 50s. In the 50s, there were a group of thinkers. Bloom was one of those thinkers, hence Bloom's taxonomy, which we always hear about, who decided that to be educated, you need logic, you need to be physically engaged in what you're doing, and you have to have this human empathetic side. There has to be some humanity in your education. You cannot simply be Spock. You cannot live long and prosper. You must have a balance of all three. I would say that most people and all children live in the doing and the empathy side. Using music as an example, children do not want to learn logic about music. Children, believe it or not, don't really care about musical notation or Bach or Buddy Holly or any of that. What they want to do is do music. They want to make music, and they want to enjoy themselves making music with their friends. Human beings live in the doing empathy stages or areas. People live in the doing and empathy areas of this balanced education. That's what they come into education with. And on top of these, we're going to add logic. This also supports brain development. Very quickly, we know that in utero, the brainstem is the first thing of the brain that is developed. The first organ of the brain, or the first area of the brain to be developed. It keeps our heart ticking, it keeps our blood pumping, it keeps us breathing without really having to think about it. The next area is the motor area. We learn to move. We move in utero, and we also learn to move outside. We learn about our world through movement. The next area, which is toddlers, that terrible two, is the limbic system. All of those organs that have to do with emotion. And there are several little organs in the brain that have to do with emotion. As I say here on this particular slide, this is where we begin. This is where children come to us. This is what they have been exposed to. They've been moving a lot, and they've been emotionally a lot. They come to us having moved a lot, we hope, and have some idea of emotion and can regulate their emotions, although we know that's not the case. And based on those two, we lay on top of it the cortex, or logical thinking, higher order thinking. Again, it's based on emotion and movement. This is important. Emotion and movement. Remember that reasoning is the process of using existing knowledge to draw conclusions, make predictions, or construct explanations. Reasoning is the process of using existing knowledge. Children come to us with the existing knowledge, we hope, of moving around, learning about their world through movement, and enjoying themselves, or not. This is where they are. Logically, if we want to move children to critical thinking, to logical thinking, to reasoned thinking, we begin where they are, moving and enjoying life. As I said earlier, one of the things we know about education is that it needs to be fairly simple. Not as in juvenile, but it has to be simple to grasp. And we move from a simple thing to a more complex thing. Simple to complex. That is one of the mantras of education. If we want to get children to think rationally, logically, critically, in general, not about anything in specific, but just in general, then we need to take away all of those things that will bog us down, that will get in our way and hamper our efforts. I believe that we can help children develop the process of thinking rationally, reasonably, logically, inductively, deductively, and abductively through intelligent conversations in the context of communicating their ideas about the world through nonverbal communication, vis-a-vis arts. Learning to think and express your thinking rationally doesn't take a textbook. It doesn't take manipulatives. Well, it might, but we'll say that it doesn't. It doesn't require worksheets. It doesn't require a test. It requires someone, aka you, someone who thinks inductively, deductively, and abductively, and weave conversations about those kinds of thinking, modeling those kinds of thinking in conversation. Just in conversation. Nothing too stressful, just conversations. And through those simple conversations, children will acquire through a process of thinking to think in all the ways that we want them to think in. So here is the basic logic of arts' context. Building on the premise that reasoning is the process of using existing knowledge to draw conclusions, make predictions, or construct explanations, we have to assume that there is existing knowledge. We have to make that assumption. Children think. There is a rational explanation for every choice a child makes. Whether the child wants to voice that or not, there is a logical reason. Because nonverbal communication is their best mode of communication, providing children nonverbal ways of expressing thinking through movement, through the visual arts, are ways that we can begin conversations about what they know. And these conversations lead to reasoned thinking, hypothetical questions, to simple induction, to simple deduction, to simple abduction. These conversations do not necessarily have to be related to any specific domain area. And yet, if you're talking about a gorilla who lives in a forest and fell out of a tree, we could logically think about a tree that is strong enough to hold the gorilla. We could logically think about a gorilla that doesn't weigh as much. We could logically think about a gorilla that was stronger and could hold on. As you can see here, the wonderful quote from Benjamin Franklin, "In this world nothing can be said to be certain except death and taxes." People will argue, and yet it's a great quote. There is nothing that is certain. And some people would say the only certain thing in this world is change, which I'm advocating here. If nothing is certain, then when things differ, there is a logical explanation for it. In this slide, you see a simple way of expressing this. You have a variable and you have an outcome. With this thing, I get that thing. And if the variable never changes, the outcome never varies. I could express this via an equation. Quite frankly, I don't know what that equation means. I'm sure someone does. It looked nice, so I chose it. This is mathematical thinking. All of these variables you see, given if I know B and I know C, I'm going to be able to deduce, I'm going to be able to figure out A. This is basic mathematical thinking. This leads to that. And because in my gorilla story, a gorilla has many attributes, shown here by all of these, this triangle, the square, the circle, the square with the rounded corners. All of those variables give us X outcome. However, if I change a variable, it changes the outcome. Changing one variable will necessitate changing the outcome. Okay, you could say, well, it changes hair color. Okay, I'll give you that one. Let's be real. If I change two variables, what if the gorilla lived in Iceland? It's going to change the outcome. When I change the variables, I change the outcome. It's logical. In this kind of thinking, it's inference. I'm making an inference based on my experiences. Changing variables changes the outcome. Children can be led to think about these things. And what makes arts as context so wonderful is that the conversations, by their very nature, are grounded on their understanding of the world. What's more personally meaningful than an idea that I came up with? Nothing. It's my idea. What's more meaningful to Sally or Juan Carlos than their ideas? Nothing. Take what they give you and change some attributes about it. Reasoning is the process of using existing knowledge. Change one thing in their existing knowledge bank, changes another. Changing how tall the gorilla is by 3 inches will change so many different things about what the gorilla can do. It may not be a huge difference, but it's a difference. Changing one thing changes another. Changing a chemical in a compound changes a compound. Changing the amount of heat for a chemical reaction changes the end product. If reasoning is a process by which children use existing knowledge to draw conclusions and make predictions or construct explanations, then this is a way that we can visualize education. The bottom of the pyramid is visceral experiences. This is early childhood, and they think. Then the next level, based on all of this stuff they come to us with, we start giving them specific skills, more information, so that they can start making those inferences and those deductions and those abductions more quickly, more frequently. This is the way it goes. The model that you see here is based on the assumption that children come to us ready for those specific skills in critical thinking. And as we know, they're not. They do not have the visceral experiences, the hands-on experiences a quality early childhood will give them to be able to take that next step, to go up the pyramid. That is where arts as context comes in. It provides them the visceral experiences, those meaningful experiences in expressing an idea via an art to others. And it is through those expressions that we can help children learn reasoning, learn to think inductively, deductively, abductively through intelligent conversations. The arts will remain at the periphery of education. Even though no one is going to say that, we know it's true. They will remain at the edge of our educational system if we continue to go down a path that highlights only one aspect of why they're wonderful. And they are. As a musician, I can't live without music. I simply hear music all the time and I'm singing all the time. My life would be less without it. And yet this is me. I don't know that Rupert Murdoch or Donald Trump or Bill Gates would really care if I really wasn't as full of person as I am right now because of music. What they would be more concerned about is thinking. How can we create innovation? How can we solve the next problem? Solving the next problem for capitalists, entrepreneurs, how can we make the next product that will make us bazillionaires? That's what's important. Thinking through the arts, building induction, deduction, abduction will help. If critical thinking is a skill, then it can be taught. Logical thinking is a skill. Innovative thinking is a skill. It is the skill of abduction. And if those are things we value, we do, then it can be taught. If these things are skills, then they must be practiced. Children need to practice inductive reasoning, deductive reasoning, abductive reasoning without being bogged down with worksheets and testing and this and this and this. There are ways that we can incorporate logical thinking into our classrooms just for the simple sake of thinking logically. Simple to complex. Logical thinking is already complex. We need to present it in simple ways. Through the context of the arts is one of those ways. And last on this particular slide, if these kinds of thinking are of value, then they must be modeled. The individuals with whom I'm speaking right now, or to whom I'm speaking right now, must model them each and every day for their students. My goal in creating this idea of arts as context is not to create the next John Williams. My goal in creating arts as context is to create thinkers who will someday unlock the mysteries of cancer. And that will only happen through reasoned, critical, and logical thinking. And these three forms of thinking can be taught through the context of the arts.